Hello, Cynthia. Thank you for coming on the Foxed In podcast to share your clinical knowledge with my audience. It's good to have you.
Yeah, so glad we were able to coordinate our busy schedules to make this happen.
Yes, on a Saturday, no less. So it doesn't miss me how very special it is that you're able to take time apart from family and things like that. So your TEDx talk, for anybody out there, I really encourage it. I think you have it pinned to your Twitter profiles, like the pinned tweet.
Yeah.
It's really, really informative. If anyone has any interest just on a ground level in intermittent fasting, because you just spell out all of the benefits essentially within an under 20-minute span, which is really succinct.
Yeah, it's funny. I had done a TED before then, and I had no restrictions on how long I could talk, which I didn't realize. It's a whole lot harder to have restrictions on the amount of time to provide information.
It is.
I had 12 minutes and I thought I was going to be fine until I started talking. You get in your flow, and then all of a sudden you look up and you've got 40 seconds left and you have three more minutes to kind of get through it. And it's a miracle that it wasn't obvious how I had to cut out a quarter of my talk. But yeah, it's been really cool. And I'm glad, because quite honestly, I have worked in Western medicine for a very long time, and I grew very weary with the pill focus of traditional Western medicine. And I just think that there's more to health than taking prescriptions. And there are absolutely instances when that's the right decision. I'm by no means being critical of my colleagues. However, we need to do a better job finding strategies for our patients that can help them maximize health gains without focusing on outdated dogma, like breakfast is the most important meal of the day. Because I get lots of hate tweets when I put things out. Case in point, my tweet from yesterday. But yeah, lots of people who it really triggers them. I mean,
let's dive into that, because this is a good thing that I can add on to as well. This is going to be a good synthesis of our fields. So talk about that. What did you tweet yesterday, just for anybody who didn't see that?
Yeah, so I basically made suggestions of things you could do when you weren't eating breakfast. And so I thought I was being kind of like tongue in cheek. I thought it was kind of funny. I always make sure I mention the kids, the significant other, smooching or sex or whatever, because that usually triggers a couple of people. And then, keeping yourself hydrated, get out in nature, all these things. And boy, does suggesting to some people to skip their breakfast make them angry. So I had to actually get a couple people. It does. It's crazy. And so I'm like, literally
sugar burners. They're hangry.
Exactly. Which we all know is bad news. Or, the wanker, as I'll refer to him, a very EU kind of term, the wanker who got all triggered by me telling him I didn't think whey protein was the be all end all. And he was like, why? What's wrong with it? So.
Well, all right. I mean, we're going to have differences in the grand medical profession. And Twitter is such a fascinating little melting pot of people's temperaments more than anything, because it certainly gets in the way. One thing about breakfast that's very interesting is the fact that it was a mounted, concerted effort by Edward Bernays, Freud's nephew, that we need a really hearty breakfast, and it was to move product, and it was a function of like the nutritional industrial complex.
Well, do you know what I heard, actually? And I don't know this, so to your listeners, I apologize. Usually I look everything up before I reference it. Yeah. But I was told that this grain-laden breakfast was really designed to be a means of controlling a man's desire to masturbate.
Because we know that there are phytoestrogens in grain products, I can see that. I don't know. Wow. Okay. So apparently today we're going to get into some really deep nutritional conspiracies, and I'm okay with that. People want to have the wool pulled over their eyes after it's pulled down.
Yep.
Oh gosh, I had not considered that. That's extremely interesting.
I need to remember where I read that, like from a reputable place. I by no means, I'm not someone that likes to like drop a bomb and walk away, but the grain industry has really schnookered us into believing that that's the right way to start our day. And what it does is it it forces us to secrete a lot of insulin. Insulin increases our appetite. It's a fat storage hormone. And then, that's not a good thing. So I am not a proponent of people eating grain-laden, sugary garbage for breakfast ever.
No. I stay away from it, because if I get in front of a bowl of Captain Crunch, I'm going to town. That's like, and it's basically just sugar cardboard.
Yeah, it is.
I've never been a big fan of breakfast. Let me talk to you about this. So if I eat a lot of food, like if I eat within an hour of waking up and a lot of food, I just do not feel good. Is that a normal response? I always thought, well, it's unhealthy because my body should be ready for breakfast, but I'm just not hungry early in the morning.
And I think that's, fairly normal, that most people can go a couple hours after they wake up. Let's say you get up at 5 and maybe it's 8 o'clock when your body's intrinsically.
Let's indulge that fantasy that I'm up at 5. That's fine.
Okay, that's my world. So
that's a good world. No, that's fine.
Yeah, that's my world. No, just saying, so hypothetically we get up at 5 and then 3 hours later we're ready to eat. But yeah, physiologically, our bodies, we don't need, it's designed that way. So think about, back when our forefathers, our ancestors, we didn't know when we were going to eat our next meal. So we need to be able to get up and get moving and try to find our food, hunt for our food, eat twigs and berries. Depending on what was available at the time. Yeah, exactly.
Twigs and berries.
Yeah. Well, that's why, feast, and it's all about feasting and fasting. There's a time and a place for food, and then the rest of the time we're fasting.
Yeah, that's a big thing you talk about. I enjoy hearing about it, and I think we could go off on a tangent here on how the human body. Yes, it was made for feasting and fasting, evolved that way, made that way, whatever you want to say, but also that kind of boom and bust when it comes to stress. Okay, we weren't made to be satiated constantly and have the insulin spikes that we do with this access to cheap food, but also the level of stress people are under that's chronic. That's the real issue. It's like we normally have a spike, like a predator's chasing us, and then a lot of rest time. Talk a little bit about that, if you don't mind, if there's anything you want to add. I'm sure.
Yeah. I talk about, in fact, I was talking about this yesterday. So sympathetic dominance. So we have these two, I'm really kind of trying to make it as accessible as possible. So parasympathetic and the sympathetic nervous system. Sympathetic nervous system is you're being chased by a rabid animal. Parasympathetic is rest and pose, when your body's ready to digest food and you're relaxed and you can defecate and all those things. And so in our overstressed, overharried, overwhelmed kind of environment that we live in, where we have access to everything all the time. And I'm going to date myself when I say this. It's the same explanation I gave yesterday. So when I was in college, when I was in college, there was no internet. We had to call each other on the phone. There was no 24/7 cable. There was not ready accessible porn all day long. It was a very, very different environment. And now everything is accessible at all times. So we can watch a movie at any time of the day or night. We are so connected to social media, but yet no one's really connected. No one's really communicating. We text instead of calling people. We're just in this environment where we're in front of electronics 24/7, and we recognize what happens to our brains when we're in front of junk light, which is the light that we get from most lights, from our computers, from our iPhone, from our iPad, etc. And we don't spend any time in nature. And so, our bodies are just so overwhelmed with stimuli all day long that we don't sleep well. We're bored. We have an inability to focus. And so a lot of the work that I do is talking to people about really simple stuff, like get out in nature first thing in the morning, because there are receptors on your skin and in your retina that will help kind of let your body know that we're not secreting melatonin because we're not going to bed. We're going to secrete cortisol so that we can get up and get moving. Just the connection. Yeah.
To cortisol.
Yeah. But cortisol is something that we need, right? But cortisol is not designed to be tapped into all day long. So cortisol is a fat storage hormone. If your body thinks you're being chased by a rabid animal and you got to run for your life, you're not going to digest food. You're not going to poop. You're not going to stop to have sex. You're heightened awareness. And so when that cortisol is tapped into chronically and habitually, like it is in most people, that is a negative detrimental impact on our bodies in so many ways. And so I find that for a lot of people, the leveling ground appears to be mid-30s and up. I always say north of 35, but people can have very maladaptive behaviors their whole life. But north of 35 is when I seem to see more men and women struggling with, they have a lot of like belly fat and they're craving sugar and they can't sleep and, you know, their gut doesn't feel right. And so it just becomes this kind of domino effect of one begets the other. And I'm sure for you, you see this with your given patient population, that you've got people that are just, I mean, they're so overstimulated all the time that, you know, it's hugely problematic. Like, I think it is such a problem that, like in my house, I'll give you a good example. My kids and I, not my husband, because he thinks it's hooey, but we have blue light blocking glasses.
I can't believe I was going to say that amber. Okay, let me look at that. So
super sexy. So these are Swanwick or Swannies. And I wear these like as soon as it starts getting dark out, these go on. Super sexy, right?
Yeah, the amber glasses. That's what one of my old mentors taught me about. Yeah.
Yeah. And so what they do is they blunt the blue light. And so blue light from our electronics tells our bodies it's not time to go to bed. And so when people like are on electronics and they're wired and tired, it's largely because their melatonin's been dysregulated and now they're secreting cortisol. And so their bodies think they need to be awake.
Yes.
So,
wow.
Hugely problematic.
Unbelievably relevant stuff. Light and music as therapy, right? That's something I heard about a few years ago. So I got trained as a neurofeedback technician and someone who administer the QEEGs. I mean, that equipment's very expensive, or I'd be doing it on my own. But I mean, the amplifiers that turn the brainwave signals into computer readable format, all that, you know what I'm talking about. And the lady who taught me that was extremely interested in alternative health stuff. And there was a whole documentary she showed about light and about mice being kept in light-free versus lit environments, and how without that, the right kind of light I'm talking about, let me be clear, that people really struggled and suffered. And vitamin D and beyond that, I'm sure, is relevant stuff that we're not getting.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. And we largely as a society get little to no exposure. I mean, think about it. The average person gets in their car, pulls out of their driveway, out of their garage, drives to work, gets out, goes into their hermetically sealed, office environment, gets no light exposure all day long, gets back in their car, drives back to their home, gets back in their garage, and then goes into their house. And that, for a lot of people, that's as much of the outside world as they experience on a daily basis.
And that's why wilderness therapy and anything that gets people active can be so helpful and a godsend, because it connects people back to their bodies and their somatic memories versus just trying to get at things from the little fragment of conscious prefrontal cortical thought. That's a whole different thing. The way the body stores trauma and the vagus nerve. I love that you talk about gut health, because the vagus nerve really plays into that, right? Like vagal.
Yes. Well, and I mean, even, my cardiology background, when someone would quote unquote vagal, someone either, peed and passed out, or they watched something that they found unpleasant, like maybe they had their blood drawn, usually a guy, and then they pass out. And so, stimulation of that nerve will lower your pulse rate. And it's a really great technique for anyone who's listening. Like whenever I do public speaking, I will stimulate my vagus nerve. And you can do that by kind of like holding your breath. Like I'll take a couple really deep yoga breaths and just hold my breath for a couple seconds, and that will stimulate that vagus nerve. But yeah, the vagus nerve is so intricately involved in digestion and so many other processes. It's, it's a cranial nerve, but we don't have enough healthy respect for it.
That's awesome. Hey, can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay. That was weird. My online connection got a little shaky.
That's okay.
Okay. Vagal nerve stimulation, that's a big wave now in therapy, and I'm all for it, because I think clinical change is only as relevant as the bottom-up methods you can use. It's very easy to tell someone to calm down or to change their thoughts. I think CBT has a place. It's absolutely a well-studied modality that has a lot of research behind it. I also think it lends itself well to that research. And I think that we have to look at the whole picture from the bottom up, from the body up, because I have so many clients who say, well, I know all this stuff. Why doesn't it work? Why in the heat of the moment is it not working? I explain to them that they're in the limbic system, fight or flight mode. Unless you've really memorized techniques that help with overcoming, you're not going to activate those. You're going to be in the most primal, base, regressed form that you manifest as a human being. You're going to be in that mode. You're going to fight or flee. So you better have access to that stuff. And it's retraining that response and increasing that window of tolerance, I think. And that's where the stuff like what you're doing comes in, of nutritional gut health, mental clarity. You mentioned that over and over again in your TED Talk about intermittent fasting, is that mental clarity you get from IF. Do you touch on that a little bit, if you don't mind? Because I think people need to hear that.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think a lot of people they hear intermittent fasting and they either think it's crazy or they kind of make the association that it's all about fat loss.
Right.
And there's so much more to it. And so I was saying this morning that, the older I get, the more I become very aware and very concerned about cognitive functioning and higher level functioning. And so mental clarity is one of the benefits of intermittent fasting, and largely because of lowered insulin levels. Remember what I said about insulin?
Right.
If insulin's up, you can't stop eating and you're going to be in fat storage mode. So, when you have these prolonged fasts, you've got lowered insulin levels, which is hugely beneficial. And, it also lessens your likelihood of developing like type 2 diabetes, developing type 3 diabetes, which is Alzheimer's. Again, I keep going back to the older I get, the more I'm like, I want to keep my brain function really like vibrant and important. But I think that's a surprise. I think as people acquiesce and get more comfortable with the strategy of intermittent fasting, they suddenly realize like, oh my gosh, I can get up in the morning, I can get so much done because I'm not sleepy because I had this cereal laden breakfast, or I've had that sugary donut, or I had a big bagel with cream cheese and I feel like I need to take a nap after sleeping for 8 hours.
Carbo overload.
Oh, it's so bad. So bad. Our bodies are not designed to eat like that. And so I think that's one of the surprising benefits that people find. They're like, oh my gosh, I feel like I'm a rock star. I can do so much with all this extra energy. My productivity has gone up exponentially. And now I don't have to work as many hours because, quite frankly, I get so much done the first 3 or 4 hours I'm at work, or the first three or 4 hours after I get the kids on the bus, or whatever life stage people are in. Or if you're in the retiree stage, that's profound. And that's without gimmicks. Like, that's just the thing about a lot about health and wellness that has really been a source of endless frustration. I'm going to pick on one company right now, Shakeology. I hope you've never ever tried Shakeology because it tastes horrible. I had someone give me a bag. It's really awful. It's like $100 for this bag of crap. And so just for shits and giggles, I tried it once and it was absolutely horrible. And I thought, why would anyone spend money on this? But, we're not designed to just eat powdered garbage. We really should be eating real food and getting back to strategies that really work, like IF, for example, when it doesn't trigger people really badly, which I sometimes see.
So I haven't heard of Shakeology, but I've heard of like Juice Plus and other juicing based diets, which, what are your thoughts on the juicing of fruits with the rind and getting the nutrition from that?
Here's my general feeling. Most juices are just sugary because people are doing like just fruit and not vegetables, or they're adding a lot of sweeteners. And so if you do an organic cold pressed vegetable juice, that's very different to me than the average pasteurized thing that you can find in the grocery store or making your own at home.
Right.
One of the benefits of actually consuming food is that not only do you have to chew it, swallow it, and then it sits in your stomach, it has to be digested, but all that fiber will slow digestion, which is beneficial. So when you eat a juice, like let's just say orange juice,
yes,
as opposed to eating an orange, it's like a shot of fructose right into your veins. And I don't think anyone, I know. If you said to me, Cynthia, like twice a year, I love to have fresh squeezed orange juice, I was like, have at it. But what do most people sit down? Yeah. What do most people sit down and eat for breakfast? They have their, cereal, their super sugary cereal, their super sugary bagel, and then they have a shot of fructose in their juice. So, as a rule, I'm not a huge fan of people drinking their calories. I'd rather they eat the food. I know that's not popular. And I tend to be a little bit more of a purist in the sense that I'd rather you sit down and have, if you're not doing intermittent fasting, have an egg, have some avocado, have some bacon, have some sausage. I'd rather you eat that than what I just mentioned, like the sugary cereal with the super sugary orange juice. Cause I just think you're setting yourself up for these huge fluctuations in insulin response, insulin spikes, blood sugar stability is dysregulated. And then you're going to be hungry like 2 hours later. And what are you going to grab? You're going to grab a granola bar, a protein bar, maybe a shake of some kind, a smoothie. And I know people like to pack their smoothies with tons of stuff in them, but I always tell them, I'm like, we can re-engineer this. You know, there's other ways to consume those things. So
one thing to go back to, I love that you were talking about pre-internet life and the way that people had to call and contact one another versus texting. From a behaviorist perspective, what we reinforce continues, and what we avoid and tell our brains is scary, well, it gains more traction as a stressor. And you see these Facebook memes, and I'm sure it's on Twitter too, but about people ignoring phone calls and be like, why would you call? Just text. I mean, that's a real perspective out there among people, I would say 35 and under, right? It's this idea that, well, if you can't get it in a text where I can read it at my leisure and not interact, then it's not, you just don't bother me with it. What we do though, when we reinforce this sort of at arm's length contact, is any kind of exposition, any sort of extemporaneous contact with people becomes something that's really scary. And then you've got these kids who are college age now who are trying to get out of giving group project speeches by having a letter written saying they have anxiety. I mean, if you have an anxiety disorder, sure, but there is healthy anxiety in development, growth and development.
Absolutely.
I wonder if you've been seeing any of this in your clinical practice where people, they pathologize certain things that are really just rites of passage.
Correct. Well, so my whole kind of mantra in life is you have to get comfortable with being uncomfortable. I mean, that's part of how we stretch and we grow as humans. And so I don't buy into that. You know, my parents, for all the faults that every human being has, were very much just do it kind of parents. Like, you're going to be uncomfortable when you have to do something new. You're going to feel uncomfortable when you start as a nurse practitioner, as an entrepreneur. You're going to feel uncomfortable. I mean, that's just the way things are. But if you don't conquer those fears, I mean, what are you setting yourself up for? I mean, how am I an example to my children if I myself am not doing exactly the same things? And so I do see that quite a bit. I do think there's a generational divide, and I don't fault people because obviously we don't decide when we're born, right? You know, we are what we are. But I look at my patients that were the World War II generation, and then I look at my parents' generation. People really wrote beautiful letters because my grandparents didn't have the ability to pick up a phone and call one another during the war. And so I still have some of my grandparents' love letters, which I think are absolutely beautiful. Yeah. But as we've gotten to this point now where people aren't forced to have conversations, people don't know how to speak. They don't know how to write. You know, my 13-year-old will send me text messages, and sometimes I have to pull them aside. And I'm like, that is not proper English. And we have to have a conversation about this. Cause I'm like, I'm not even sure what that acronym is, but you need to school me on that and not use it again. Phone. Yeah. Let me see your phone. So yes, I do think there are people that are, they are just so uncomfortable with being uncomfortable that they don't push themselves forward. And I think some of my greatest lessons in life have been when I've been really uncomfortable and I've just been like, just do it, got to do it. I mean, every TED Talk, I can tell you, I get up there, I'm like, it's like jumping off a cliff.
Yes, it is. No, I believe you. I'll take your word for it, because I did debate in high school, and I wouldn't go back and change that for the world. I think it's important that people learn how to communicate their points in a semi-public
civil public forum. Yes.
How about that? That's great. What 3 people would you meet, living or dead, if you could meet? Something I like to ask guests, have a conversation with them. Yeah.
You know, I would say first Winston Churchill, because I'm fascinated with Churchill. Nice. I love London. Like, I'm a total Anglophile. I enjoy the history. And so the last time my family and I were in London, we went to the Churchill Museum, and he was just a brilliant strategist. I just find him absolutely fascinating.
Right.
So Winston Churchill, I would say probably next. I think about, someone who's current day, but I just respect her enormously. Brené Brown. I'm not sure if you follow her.
Oh, of course.
I just feel like her work is profoundly transformative for so many people. I mean, I've listened to her Netflix thing like 3 times. Each time I've gotten something different out of it, because I just think we as human beings need to get out of ourselves. We need to just think beyond, worrying about just ourselves and being uncomfortable, and accepting that we're all fallible. I just think she's brilliant. So I would say her, and then I want to make sure I pick someone a little more, maybe not someone who's living. I have to be honest. I lost my grandmother, my maternal grandmother, 5 years ago.
Oh, okay.
And she was absolutely she lived in Denver, absolutely one of the most brilliant women I've ever met in my entire life. I mean, she had a very tough life, my grandfather was not an easy person to be married to. She, when women were not serving in positions of power, had an incredible job, and really served as an example to our entire family. So I'd say probably her.
That's impressive. Okay.
Yeah, she's an incredible woman. So I miss my grandmother. Miss her every day.
Beautiful. I'm sorry to hear that. It sounds like she made such an indelible, amazing, positive impact on you, though.
She did. She really did. And, she held together. She's the matriarch of a very big Italian family. So she was this little German woman, little itty bitty thing, tiny but powerful and very gentle in the way that she interacted with people, really served as an example to her community and really a good person. So if I can grow up to be anything like her, then I've been a success.
Yes, I love it. So something that I wanted to I'm glad I remembered this, to go back to was your very catchy and accurate dubbing of Alzheimer's as type 3 diabetes. You referenced that in your 12-minute TED Talk on IF, but I wanted to hear more about it. Like what led you to that conclusion, if you maybe read that somewhere else or just came to it on your own. Talk to us more about that, because it's very helpful to know.
Yeah, well, I just think I've seen so much, the escalating rates of obesity, and then, I call it diabetes and obesity. And then recognizing that you're starting to see these profound shifts in cognitive functioning as people are aging, and recognizing sugar really is a toxin. I mean, I know people don't like to hear this, but processed sugars are a toxin to our bodies. And, over time, we damage not just cells in our kidneys and our heart and our nerve endings, but we also damage, the dendritic, mechanisms in our brains. And so I think that if but nothing else, if people want to age well, they have to be cognizant of ensuring that their glucose levels, insulin levels are as low as they can be, within a healthy parameters. But I think for me, I started just seeing that every single diabetic I was talking to was really struggling, whether or not it was a manifestation of the inflammation in their brain. I'm sure that was contributory, but also the fact that their blood sugars, as they were getting less and less, or as they were becoming increasingly insulin resistant, I was seeing that they were struggling more with simple tasks, executive functioning, which is something that I'm sure you see in your inpatient population. But that to me is the greatest tragedy, because our bodies may fail us, but as long as our minds are still working, I think that's really critical. I think for many of us that are very intelligent, it's really important that we can still make those kinds of connections. But I just started seeing a lot of my given patient population struggling with, very simplistic kind of tasks. They stopped reading. They were sitting in front of the TV like a bump on a log, and, weren't interested in interacting with their family members, and were becoming increasingly forgetful and, struggling with memory and, just things that I think would be horrible to have to go through. I mean, if you can't get beyond it's not good for your heart, it's not good for your kidneys, it's not good for your nerve endings, not good for your brain. I mean, if but nothing else, your brain controls almost everything. So.
Wow. Yeah, absolutely. The executive functioning there. I love your very applicable vagal nerve hack there of breathing in and holding it. Sounds like it probably interferes with the respiratory sinus arrhythmia, huh? I love these terms.
Yeah. Well, I mean, so think about it. Sometimes when we were doing a consult on someone that, we knew that if we could stimulate their vagus nerve, and you can stimulate your vagus nerve by trying to bear down. I mean, there's all different ways that you can do that.
Yeah.
But sometimes before giving a drug, we would be trying to get them to stimulate their vagus nerve to slow their heart rate down. So yeah, I mean, that was a technique I learned in cardiology, and then doing yoga, like yoga breath, like just, it all comes back to the breath. So I was, before I step on stage, it all comes back to the breath. I'm like, okay, I don't want to get jittery, because if I get jittery, I'm going to talk fast and I'm going to shake. So let's
consciously acting against that. That's what I try to teach clients, is notice where anxiety starts in the body and interfere there, because that's so much more effective than telling yourself to calm down. We all know how that turns out.
Yeah, it doesn't do a whole lot. I just know that for myself, it's very effective for me to hold my breath, take a deep breath, hold it. Because, for me, I tend to be, you can't see here, but I tend to be very animated when I speak. Don't ever read comments below videos because, I had a clicker in my hand and I got really criticized because I was so uncomfortable holding this clicker that I never really moved my hands a lot. So people were like, I look like I was like what do they say? Like a pecking hen.
Wow. I didn't notice that. Okay.
Yeah. Oh, I got things. Stop moving. You're making me dizzy. Don't ever read those comments. They're never helpful.
Yeah, I'm getting that. That makes sense. Man.
Oh, it's funny. I was telling my husband, I go through comments ebb and flow. Sometimes they email them to me directly. And so lately I've been getting like, I'll wake up in the morning. I'm like, what thing did someone say today? And so I've gotten, you're too skinny. I got, someone criticized me.
Go ahead.
Yes. I've gotten that quite a bit. Don't use the word detox and make you sound like a charlatan. It was just like really, and I was like, I don't think I used that word in that talk. What are they talking about?
Number one, you probably didn't use it. Number two, detoxifying the body, even if that's something that, let's say, very metaphysically based, non-research stuff uses, then so what? It's an actual term that does have a medical basis. It's just people have co-opted it in recent years to mean something that it doesn't.
Right. And that's a really good point. So I was reading what this one person had said yesterday to a physician friend, and my physician friend was like, don't even pay attention to that. And it's like, but you just have days where I had someone criticize me because they saw a bra in a photo, and I'm like literally like a sliver of a bra in a photo.
Wow. That seems like some rather misogynistic hate.
Yes. Well, it just shows you there are just people, I'm sure you see people like this. You just think you need a hobby. And so anyone that's listening that's ever sent me a nasty email, you need a hobby. Because I don't have enough time in my life to send that kind of nastiness. I just don't.
I think it's important that we create things in life rather than tear down.
Correct.
There's a place for criticism of art and other fields, because otherwise we get into this area of fragile narcissism where people can't take any criticism, but then too much of that and it becomes very mean-spirited. It's a real balancing act.
Yes.
So
yes.
One thing I wanted to ask you is, what to you, so there's different schools of thought on intermittent fasting, right? There's have an 8-hour eating window, and then there's maybe other views where you eat one meal at one end and one meal at the other end of the day. What do you think is most effective for IF strategy?
I think consistency. So I know there are lots of different strategies. There's even a strategy where people eat normally for 5 days and then eat under 500 calories if they're a female, under 600 calories for 2 days if they're a male.
Okay.
And for me personally, I just think a 16-8 or an 18-6. So either a 16 or an 18-hour fasting window, and then a 6 to an 8-hour feeding window is what seems to work the best consistently. And so I'm all about easy, flexible, etc. You can do it in any time zone. So when people tell me I'm traveling, I'm like, you can still do it. I'm going to fly to San Diego next week. I will be doing it. Even though my body will think I'm 3 hours ahead, I will be doing it. And so, I just remind people that consistency is key. If you can consistently show up and, ensure that you've got at least a 12 to 14 hour fasting window most days of the week, you're really winning.
Yeah.
You will have days where you need to break your fast early. You will have days you can go later. Like last weekend, I did a 20/4. So I did a 20-hour fast with a 4-hour feeding window. That doesn't work for me because I can't eat enough calories in that 4 hours. Like I'm not hungry enough to eat a second meal.
No, of course,
I was like, I'm really uncomfortable. And now I'm going to not eat for another whole day. And so my husband was like, okay, that didn't work for you. And I was like, and that's cool. That's okay.
Yeah.
I'm not a fan of people doing the one meal a day because I think it gets tricky. I think my grandmother would have said that one meal a day would have been perfect for her at the point she was at in her life. But I think for most people, it's very hard to get sufficient calories into one meal a day.
Yeah. Okay. I think that's pretty relevant.
Yep. So I think a 16-8 or an 18-6. I think consistently doing those, bless you, seem to be the ones that people do the best with long term.
There you go. What is a food that you just think is like irredeemable? that you just hate?
Oh,
But for
I don't,
nutritional value.
oh, for, okay, this will make you laugh. I don't love sweet potatoes.
Okay.
There, I've said it. I personally don't love them, although I recognize that there's inherent tremendous value in them. I do on occasion force myself to eat them, usually covered with something, because I just don't love them. But
Yeah.
I think the things that bug me the most are whatever the fat is at the moment.
Yeah.
Like, for a while there was agave syrup, which is like a dose of fructose. Right now it's these big like bowls, like people, I mean, they're beautiful on Instagram. People make these beautiful bowls and they're probably having 80 calories of carbs, or 60 grams of sugar in these bowls. And I just think to myself, you've just derailed all your hard work.
Okay. I think I know what you're talking about. Like when they make a bowl
Smoothie
of,
bowls. Yeah.
what is it called?
It's like a smoothie bowl. Like you'll see them and they're perfectly like they have dragon fruit and maybe they got cacao. And I mean, it looks beautiful.
Yeah.
A lot of times people call them acai bowls, like ACAI. Yeah.
Oh, I know. Acai berry. Yes.
Yeah. Which is like the hot thing of the moment. So I would say anything that's like super trendy, I'm kind of always skeptical.
Yeah, with good reason. I mean, that stuff, it's usually a flash in the pan. No pun intended.
Like agave syrup.
Yeah, I'll keep that in mind. What is the most, I mean, obviously we're being HIPAA compliant and everything, but I want to hear if you can maybe tell us what the most inspiring clinical turnaround with a patient you've had with good nutrition, like something that surprised you in a positive way.
Yeah. I had a woman who told me she had been searching me for she had been searching for me for 15 years. And I didn't initially understand what that represented, but she had been seen by everyone and everything you can imagine. And so, she had a lot of bloating. She couldn't sleep. She felt terrible. She had gained a bunch of weight. She was really inflamed. And so, we did some very targeted testing, changed her diet. And, for me, it was really inspiring because she went from really struggling to think at 50, this is not the way she wants to live her life for the rest of her life, to within 6 months, she was sleeping better. Her digestion was working well. She was going back to work. She didn't have chronic pain anymore. She had a better relationship with her family. Hers is probably the most marked transformation because when she came to me, she was really suffering on every level, spiritually, mentally, physically, and had really lost all hope. And although we had conversations about ensuring that she was getting the kind of emotional support that she clearly needed. So she was seeing a mental health specialist, but I was genuinely concerned that she was at the point where she would consider attempting suicide. She was so desperate to feel better.
Was it leaky gut stuff too?
Yeah. And so, we touched on this, but when you think about like the bulk of our neurotransmitters in our body, anywhere from 85 to 90% are created in our gut. If our gut isn't healthy, we aren't going to feel good. We're going to be anxious. We're going to be depressed. We're going to really struggle to make these healthy chemicals that are designed to help us sleep and relax and, just feel good about ourselves. And so I think for her, a lot of it, the turnaround was the mental health piece, that she suddenly felt worthy of the effort of taking better care of herself. And so that for me was really gratifying. And, I think it's awesome that, she's tangentially working with me still, but knowing that I touched a life in such a way that she had really given up hope, like completely had given up hope.
Yeah, absolutely. And so what do you credit the biggest mental health change on a nutritional level to, like the reduced insulin?
I think it's a lot of things. I think it's balancing blood sugar. I think it's, lowered insulin levels. I think it's the better production of neurotransmitters so that they feel physically better. I think it's the better sleep. You can't lose weight if you don't sleep properly. I think the statistic is for less than 6 hours of sleep, it reduces your ability to control your blood sugar adequately by 60%. So for anyone who's listening who doesn't sleep properly and you think it's not important, it really, really is. It's critical. I think it's those things in particular. And I think the other piece is, for so many years we bastardized fats as being detrimental to our health. And so as people are consuming more healthy fats, they're satiated, they feel happy. Again, it helps contribute to the hormone, the hormone production in their bodies, whether it be, sex hormones or otherwise, that, they just feel a whole lot better. So I think it's those kinds of things that are very simple. Those are not advanced concepts, but very simple concepts that can be improved upon by changing what you eat.
It's they're simple concepts, and this gets into an overlap between our two fields. The solutions for any given problem may be extremely straightforward and simple, but the problem is in the application. The problem is in just how addictive sugar is.
Yes.
And just how, especially it's pernicious when people aren't aware of the hit to their emotions, the positive small little burst that they're addicted to with sugar that ultimately leads to a lot of decline. It isn't worth it long term. So if people can get some lifestyle changes, if they can implement some changes that help them to experience positive emotion without that, and substitute that sugar hit for something else, I think it makes all the difference in the world.
Absolutely. And it's interesting to me, being on Twitter, which is by far my favorite social media platform, because it's just, generally speaking, depending on who you follow, it's smart and it's fast.
I like that too. I really love that. It's also surreal to see doctors with MD in the name having debates on Twitter too. I'll say that.
Well, I love it because I've got a couple. I don't know if you follow Tro. Do you follow Dr. Tro?
I do.
I love Dr. Tro. Awesome. So I was on his podcast with my co-host yesterday. And so I grew up in New Jersey and he grew up in New York. And so occasionally we'll drop some forward expletives. But he is a heavy hitter. He has no problems going to battle, to express his opinion about things. And I think being a disruptor is a good thing. There's lots of people doing great work, but there are just as many of us who are helping to kind of change the tide, if you will. But the point about Twitter is you want to get into a brawl on Twitter, you want to bring up sugar. It's unreal. There was one day I brought up a sugar thing. I had like a bag of sugar and talked about how many people were over consuming sugar and how sugar was essentially like an illicit drug, and people went bananas.
Yeah, of course they did. I don't know if you know Allie.
Yes.
She's hilarious because she brought that up too.
Yeah.
Said, guys, I'm going to talk about sugar in one of our little chat groups. And I said, rip, Allie, enjoy the band. Kidding, of course, but my God.
It can be, it can really trigger people in a bad way. And I always say, like, if it bothers people that much, you have to kind of check yourself. Like, if someone's tweet really bothers you that much, you got to check in with yourself. Like, you need to just get it together, put your big boy pants on, big girl panties.
Yeah, all those.
Move forward.
Exactly. Oh, Allie Covington, she's hilarious. Boy, is she serious about training. She posted stuff about like working out while she was pregnant right up until delivery day. Whoo boy.
You know what's funny is, what's funny though, is that like, I have 2 kids. Mm-hmm. I was very active with both my pregnancies, lost the pregnancy weight very easily. I think part of that's because I took care of myself, and my mindset was always, I put a pound on, I'm taking it off. Like, that's just my mentality. Yeah. But I don't think I got really serious about training.
Yeah.
Probably until I was closer to 40. But before then I was always active. It wasn't that I wasn't, but I have to give, for anyone who feels an enormous sense of pressure to be training during a pregnancy, I'm like, my hat's off to you. I'm like, I was more about like, let me sleep. Let me just try to sleep and then, try to be on call and everything else. But yeah, Allie's phenomenal. She's got an incredible story and
she was
incredible kiddos.
So tell us, to the huge epidemic of autoimmune disorders that we're facing. I heard you mention, and I don't hear this mentioned a lot, Hashimoto thyroiditis. Mm-hmm. Talk a little bit about what you think would be most helpful for that and other autoimmune conditions, if you don't mind. That would be a great jump off point.
Yeah, no, so any autoimmune disorder, you're really looking at gut health. And so prolonged antibiotic use is a risk factor. Stress. Right. Depends on the stage that people are at, too much alcohol use.
Of course.
I'll give you an example. I was treated for Lyme appropriately, spent a month on antibiotics, and developed psoriasis 6 months later. And going gluten-free then fixed that. But for so many people, they don't even realize that they're at risk for developing autoimmune issues. And a lot of that can be related to the gut microbiome and whatever particular organisms are thriving in that environment. Sometimes it's non-beneficial bacteria. So when we're looking at people that have thyroid disorders, super common for women, 80 to 85% of women that are diagnosed with hypothyroidism, underactive thyroid, have an autoimmune condition called Hashimoto's. And so, it's really trying to determine like what is impacting your body in such a profound and negative way that you now have developed an autoimmune issue, where autoimmune problems are when the body starts attacking itself. That's what makes it so significant. It's not as benign as, oh, I've got high blood pressure or I've got high cholesterol. This is actually your body is attacking itself. It's not recognizing itself as itself. So, you'll have, with the thyroid, you've got, an autoimmune response to the thyroid gland, which there are thyroid receptors in every cell in the body, super important endocrine organ. We don't respect it enough. And so very common to see women struggling with an underactive thyroid, especially after pregnancies or as they head into perimenopause and beyond. And you can feel really pretty crummy. So, again, goes back to gut health, choices that we're making, foods we're eating, stress, antibiotic use. How many people have been on antibiotics more than a few times in their adult years really opens up the opportunity to developing health issues. And Hashimoto's is probably the most common thing, but rheumatoid arthritis, psoriasis, eczema are all signs of autoimmune issues.
Absolutely.
Definitely things you want to look for.
Yeah. And then when people have those, what should they do to overhaul the health and do obviously nutritional stuff? Yeah.
I mean, highly by individual, but if you look at statistically things that can be beneficial, elimination diets, whether it's a broad-based one or one that's solely focused on the most inflammatory foods like gluten, grains, dairy, sugar, soy, but also, looking at gut healing foods, what can you be on that can be beneficial for the gut? A lot of people ask me about L-glutamine, which is a powder. I don't think that necessarily works really well for everyone, especially if they are unable to break down glutamic acid, which can impact their ability to produce GABA, which is supposed to be this anti-anxiety neurotransmitter. But if you can't break it down, it can make it worse. But I think it's really being thoughtful about less processed foods, getting enough sleep, self-care strategies are all really critical. And it's hard to say, like, it's hard to make a blanket statement, but there are definitely gut healing foods. Like even bone broth can be beneficial for a lot of people. And if you're not familiar with that, it's just, you can buy it now readily made, but you can also make your own. It's pretty easy.
Yes. I remember you did a podcast where you were talking about don't make bone broth in the house, for God's sake, if it's beef.
Yeah, it stinks. It smells really bad. Like
slaughterhouse.
Yeah, it might make you feel like you can't then consume it. Yeah, I buy beef bone broth. I don't make it at home. Mm-mm.
That sounds like a funny story. All right. That is extremely helpful stuff. You've talked about Megaspore, Prescript Assist, Clear Labs.
And if you've got, if you have the ability to order them yourself, I do a lot of my ordering off of Full Script. And so it's really nice because it'll just drop ship to my patients, which is really nice. So, but yeah, Megaspore is great. It's always going back to what does the patient need? Not everyone needs to start with probiotics, but obviously I definitely have my favorites for sure.
Yeah. Beautiful stuff. What do you attribute this amazingly pernicious development of not autoimmune, but leaky gut to in our culture? I mean, sugar, obviously, processed foods.
Stress, when we're talking about autoimmune stuff, same kinds of things, stress, antibiotic use. It goes back to the self-care piece. It's standard American diet. For those who are not familiar with that term, it's really a highly processed, low residue diet, which is very nutrient devoid. And
right.
I mean, ultimately, there's not a lot of value in consuming those foods. So, it's getting back to basics. And unfortunately, as a nation, we're convinced that we don't know how to cook anymore. And
right.
We're so disconnected from our food. That's the first thing to really, battle, is to really have people understand that to empower them, that they can get back in their kitchen and they can put meals together, and it doesn't have to come out of a box, a bag, or can, every single time they go to eat, in all honesty.
Yeah. I really appreciate that. It doesn't have to come out of that. And there are so many books that people can get now from Amazon or wherever that give really simple recipes for whatever empirically validated diet you want to go on that cuts down on processed food. So I just want to encourage people, please go find stuff that you that works for you and is relatively simple, because the knowledge is out there.
Yeah. And, a good resource is the Whole30 diet. That's, tends to be the gluten, grains, dairy free, but, there are myriad, like you don't have to buy a book. There's tons of resources online. The foods tend to be very flavorful, and that's a good place to start if you're really trying to clean up your diet. But for a lot of people, it's just, they got to clean out their pantry. They got to clean out their fridge.
Gluten, grain, dairy, get it out of your diet, people.
Yeah. Well, if you're doing a Whole30, I might be, the most hated person in America if I'm basically telling people that's what they need to be doing. But I do find that removing more processed foods, people lose weight. They do, because they're forced to eat real food.
I think that the gluten that's put in bread now is terrible. I mean, isn't it true that bread now has more gluten in it than it did in the past? I mean,
well, it's a different type. It's dwarf wheat. And then, the biggest issue is glyphosate, which is what's sprayed on most wheat to ensure that it doesn't spoil. So it's this, I always say Monsanto is the devil, but it's a corporation that is heavily infiltrated into our U.S. government, and they control a lot of the way our food is our grains are prepared and grown, and it's problematic, hugely problematic. So sometimes when people travel overseas, they'll say, "Oh, I can eat bread in Europe, but I can't eat bread here. Why is that?" And I was like, well, first of all, it's a different type of variant of wheat, and sometimes it's interesting. It isn't so much the gluten; it's what's sprayed on the wheat that makes it contribute to leaky gut. So going back to that autoimmune piece, diet is huge.
Absolutely. Wow. Yeah. And again, it goes back to that point of, if people wish they could take just a pill to fix it, right? And that comprehensive lifestyle change can be so.
But it's harder, right? It's harder to do that, and that's the problem. Is we've convinced patients that a pill solves everything. The pharmaceutical industry has done a huge disservice by being able to directly market to consumers on paid advertisements on TV or within magazines. They'll convince people, if you got restless legs, you need a pill. Well, you got this problem, you need a pill. Well, that's not always the case. And which is not to suggest there are not valid reasons to be on pharmaceuticals. It just isn't appropriate for everything. And unfortunately, we've conditioned our fellow Americans that, a pill fixes everything. And sometimes it's harder to do the other work. And so it's easier to accept that I need a pill, or I need a powder, or I need a potion, or I need some gimmick to make this work.
Yeah. It absolutely is. So switching gears a little bit here, what got you so interested? So your credentials for everybody out there, and I'll put these in the description of the podcast because I'm kind of doing it backwards here. You're a nurse practitioner and you're a functional nutritionist. You were trained in that too.
Mm-hmm.
So your credentials are definitely worthwhile. You know what you're talking about. What got you interested in this profession? What got you into it?
Into the nurse practitioner?
Yeah, from the very beginning.
Okay, so my first undergraduate degree was in international studies, and I was pre-law. I was one class away from minoring in French. I was going to become an attorney, applied to law school, got in, and then I had an epiphany when I realized that I was going to be taking on a massive amount of debt. And then I was like, I don't know if I really want to be an attorney. So I went to work for a Fortune 500 company, which I absolutely hated. I didn't like being a cog in a wheel. I didn't like sitting in a cubicle. I didn't like, having so much restrictions on my free time. And so I got a dog, and the dog changed my life. And so then I initially thought about becoming a vet, and then realized I have horrible allergies. And the long story short is I then realized that I really wanted to go into medicine. And so I took 2 years of pre-med classes, never worked harder. And then a professor looked at me and said, "What are you doing in this class?" Like, I was in like an organic chemistry class. "Why are you in this class?" Because you're a couple of years older than the undergrads, but why are you here? And so when I told him the story, he said, "Oh, you need to become a nurse practitioner." And I was like, "What?" And so I then applied to 4 or 5 schools, but I really wanted to go to one school in particular because at the time I was very interested in HIV and AIDS research. And at the time I was working as a counselor in DC. And so I applied to a joint program. So I got a second bachelor's and a master's from Johns Hopkins. And so that changed my life. That absolutely changed my life. And that was absolutely the right decision. And all my other friends were like going off to grad school, getting married. And here I was going back to do another undergraduate degree and fell into emergency medicine. And intellectually, I'd never been so challenged in such a great way. I loved that every day I went to work, I saw something different. And then, became a nurse practitioner and loved hearts, loved everything about cardiology, did that for a while. And then I had children, and then I wanted my life to be a little less exciting. And so I have, my oldest will be 14 next week. Nice. And he was born, healthy, happy, and started developing eczema when he was an infant. And I wanted to understand why. And so every time I took him to the pediatrician, I would say, is it something I'm eating? Because he was breastfeeding. I said, no, no, no. It's, this, this, and this. And so I read a book that changed my life called The Unhealthy Truth by Robin O'Brien. If you've never read it, it's worth reading. That book changed my life. Then I became very interested in food and nutrition and looking at things very differently. I am not the same person I was before I read that book. And that completely changed my whole life. So that book changed that. And then a couple other things, trying to figure out, like, did I want to do a doctoral program? Did I want to become a wellness coach? And then I fell into a functional nutrition program, and that was the right fit, absolutely the right fit. But then it became very hard to go to work every day and write scripts, because I kept saying, I think there's more to it than this. I think it's, the scripts are important, but what they're eating is just as important, if not more important. So.
Absolutely. That's great. You said you were a counselor. What kind? What was that like?
So I did HIV counseling, and so I loved that. So imagine, DC back in the 1990s.
Yeah.
Very different population than what I had in Baltimore. And so I was all gung-ho. I'm going to Baltimore. I'm going to do this. I'm going to become an HIV NP. And, I loved it. And I worked on the AIDS floor. Totally different population. It was one of the saddest experiences of my entire life, because I had people my own age that were dying. I had, Baltimore had so many social issues that it was hard for me to wrap my head around. And I was such a suburban girl, like naive suburban girl. But I think I had to flip-flop. And so I kind of fell into emergency medicine, and fit my adrenaline junkie personality.
Wow. That's inspiring. So your view on health is a systemic sort of construct rather than just isolated to the scripts. That's really what got you into functional nutrition.
Yeah. Yeah. And and just, seeing the kind of work, I get referrals from my Western medicine trained peers. I get referrals from other functional medicine providers. And that to me is incredibly gratifying. I don't advertise because I don't need to. I say every day, like, I'm grateful and humbled. And if I needed the validation to know that my skill set is really needed in this space, there've been multiple opportunities over the last year. I think my husband was kind of like, okay, maybe you're onto something, being married to the engineer, he's initially a little bit like, are we doing the right thing by, having you leave like this job that's really well paid and everything else. And I think, this past year definitely showed that it's the right path.
Good. Yeah. It's a message that people are ready for. I think that things start from the gut up, and that enteric nervous system is so crucial. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And the memories throughout the body are not just isolated to the brain. I'm hesitant to talk about very experimental mental health stuff, but have you heard of the cases of people who were the recipients of organ transplants and then had memories that inexplicably were tied to some body part, and they found out that the organ they got, like the backstory explained why they were feeling a certain way or having certain dreams?
I have, although I don't have like a specific, source for that. But yes, sure. I have heard, patients explain and feel that they themselves, after having an organ transplant, are somehow changed in a beneficial way, or, have memories that they didn't have from before. And so I think that our bodies are so beautifully interconnected, but we like to think of them as being so separate from one another, much like, a traditional Western medicine mindset sometimes is very compartmentalized. We just worry about one body part or one organ, and then everyone else has to worry about the rest of the organs. But realizing that they're all interconnected.
Well, the mind-body dualism that Descartes introduced was so detrimental. I think the blood-brain barrier is important to recognize, and things cross over. It's ridiculously, I know that usually is referred to how medicine can't make it past that, but I think we're just starting to scratch the surface of how integrated we really are as a system.
Yeah, absolutely. And I truly believe that. I don't think that I necessarily at the time of my training really understood that, but that's the beauty. We can either evolve or we can putrefy, and I'd much rather evolve. Like I always say, I'm a really evolved healthcare provider. What I used to believe when I started is very different than what I believe now. And I think being open-minded is so critical, not only as a clinician, but just as a human being. That's why, I sometimes find, I hate to keep relating this back to social media, but sometimes that's what really saddens me about social media, is that it gives us opportunities to connect with people who may otherwise have very differing opinions. But if we're respectful of one another, really that's what it's about, mutual respect. If we're respectful of one another, we can say, hey, I don't necessarily agree with that, but that really made me think. Thank you. And sometimes I'll just say, thank you for making me think about things way differently than I had been.
Yes, exactly. I mean, it's the difference between stagnation and growth. I think it comes back to that. It's a very good way of looking at it. What is something that I like to ask guests this, especially if they're in the healthcare professions, what do you see as gaps or as really big areas of improvement in the mental health system, if you've given that any thought?
Gaps. Oh goodness. I probably see more gaps because I think that there are a lot of really talented, and I think mental health is so multi-tiered. It isn't just MDs or NPs. I mean, it is the entire realm of mental health. I think I see more gaps in the care for people that deserve to have the support they need and desire. Yeah. We were saying off air about how I worked at a hospital in Baltimore that was across the street from a very well-respected mental health facility. And I did a lot of the intake for some of people who really needed help emergently. And so that left an indelible impression on me about just how unsupported people can be in trying to get care. You have to be willing to kill yourself or kill someone else. Otherwise you're just left to the wilderness. And I just think that there needs to be more resources available, more providers available. It shouldn't take a month and a half to get in to see a psychiatrist if someone's really ill. They shouldn't have to play, this nonsense of going to the ER and feigning, concerns in order to get help. And so, from my perspective, and certainly this has never been my area of focus, but certainly I saw people who were suffering, acutely or chronically from many different things. I just think there are gaps in the kinds of care that should be available to people on a consistent basis. We need to understand that, sometimes mental health is not something people can really control. I mean, especially with personality disorders, if you're born with it,
right.
It's a whole other issue if someone doesn't think they have a problem, but if they really are seeking help, they're really seeking opportunities to get help for themselves and they can't get the support they need. I think that's criminal.
Absolutely. So one thing that I wanted to ask, and I just want to say beforehand, your videos about menopause, your heart for helping women through mid-age and the difficulties entailed in that, especially with the American Western standard diet, is beautiful. I wanted to flip the script a little bit here and ask you what you see as big impediments to men's health and to testosterone depletion, things like that.
This is easy. So the things that can impact women can impact men as well. So things like insulin resistance, absolutely, will plummet testosterone production, and men go through andropause, just like women go through menopause. So they're having, lessening degrees of secretion of testosterone. So, obviously having a healthy weight, making sure your insulin levels are low, ensuring you're getting enough sleep, not being addicted to, how do I put this? Not being addicted to porn, not being addicted to psychotropic agents, testosterone. I mean, there are all these things that it can impact testosterone production, but also ensuring that your lifestyle, that your stress is properly managed. Because when you look at, anyone who's taken biochemistry, you look at the way that, we break down DHEA and cortisol. And so what's cleaved from DHEA, which is this vitality hormone, is testosterone. So if your stress levels are really, really high, your body is preferentially going to shunt production to cortisol over DHEA, and you won't make testosterone. So, it always goes back to lifestyle, nutrition, exposure to obesogens, estrogenic properties, personal care products, toxins in our environment and our food, eating organically. I know this is never popular on Twitter, but I do think the quality of our meat and fish is really critical. And so if you're eating factory farm meat and farm raised fish, you're going to be exposed to a whole lot more things than you want to. But that's a good start. maintaining a healthy body weight, keeping your insulin levels low, sleeping, eating a good quality diet, exercising. That's another great way to boost testosterone. And then, just the normal, like having sex is important for, keeping your testosterone levels in a healthy range. I know everyone just kind of goes, oh, so.
But you got to practice it, right?
Exactly. It is a practice, It is a practice.
It's an evidence-based practice because we know children come from it.
That's true. That's true. Yes, it does.
I just want to do a comedy podcast at some point with guests because there's so many humorous ways to diffuse tension and taboos.
Yes. Well, and it's interesting. I think there's a lot of the work that I do, there's an ageism taboo. People want to talk about sex, but they don't want to talk about sex. People want to talk about, sexual issues, but they don't want to talk about it. And I just think it should be no different than anything else. Like I could get 10 women on a private Zoom call, and I'll tell you one thing, they're all thinking the same thing, but they're all too embarrassed to ask. It's sad, but it's sad Americans can be very puritanical. So I always remind people those. I bet you if you have that question, 10 other people do too.
You know what's frustrating to me is that we can be so puritanical on stuff that's natural, but then porn and sex, selling sex, we're not puritanical about at all. So it's the hollow form of the stuff that we regurgitate out, but it's the actual intimacy. And I think you go really analytic with this, that there's still a fear of intimacy. That's a whole different tangent, but
but I agree with you. And I think that, that starts with conversations with our children, but, under the age of 35, I have a friend who's a sex expert. And so she was saying under 35, almost all of the men are porn addicts.
Can you tell me more about how you see that damaging things from either a physiological or a psychological or both perspective? Because that's a good topic. I think I talk about it a lot with clients and on Twitter.
I mean, I think it's a dopamine issue. If you're getting those hits of, dopamine every time you're, going in and looking at, which is oftentimes a very contrived, it's scripted, contrived, situation. I think it's damaging because people that are paid to be doing those acts are doing things that, maybe the average woman or man has no interest in doing. So I think it sets expectations really at ridiculous levels. I think just physically, most women probably don't look like the women that are on there. Same thing with men. So I think it just sets unrealistic expectations. And my understanding of what makes it so destructive beyond that, just the visualization of it all, is the fact that, it's that addict, that dopamine, like every time they're watching it, they get more dopamine hits, much like the people that are addicted to social media. They can't get away from their phones. And it's like ping, 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 ping. They more likes. I need more likes. I need more, I need more people reaching out to me. And it's just this kind of like empty void of social media nonsense. Like that's like the vortex.
So you think that it's the contrived situation, just the stimulus oversaturation too of pornography?
Right.
I agree with that completely.
Yeah. I mean, I am by no means an expert. I'm just kind of looking at it from a clinical perspective. And I think it's also the fact that, back in the olden days when I was growing up, I mean, it was a magazine. And so it was very hard for kids to get access to those things. Whereas now it's so readily accessible. It's almost not special. It's not as unique because it's so accessible. I mean, I have 2 middle schoolers. And so my husband is usually the one that goes to all the talks on, protecting your kids from the internet and having all these, security devices and all these things that, kind of monitor what they have access to. But I think our generation, or my children's generation rather, just has exposure to things that, most of us were not exposed to at the same age. And so I think that can be, as their brains are still developing, we know their frontal lobe's not fully developed until they're 25. And you just think, the risk cost benefit, they don't think about those things. They're not physically equipped to be able to think risk cost benefit. So I just think it's multiple physiologic and emotional contributors that can make that difficult to process. Not even without the intimacy, because there appears to be none in any of that realm.
Oh, and the porno? Yeah. That's the storylines are pretty lacking too. I don't think many delivery boys who are getting lucky. How about that?
You're like, that's every 15-year-old's dream. Yeah, exactly.
Ma'am, I'm just trying to give you a pizza. I don't have time for this.
Yeah, it's like bad acting. It's just bad all the way around. What's
That's my
interesting.
biggest complaint is it's the acting. I mean, at least
Right.
commit to the role.
Yeah, no, well, you know what's interesting? I watched a documentary about this, and my husband was like, "You're such a dork." And so it was talking about how Twitter is actually, I didn't realize this, there's like the dark side of Twitter, and I guess there's a lot of sex trafficking stuff that goes on Twitter, or porn stuff that goes on. And so it was kind of profiling 4 or 5 women, and they were very young, maybe 18. And so they were saying like the average woman who goes in the porn industry lasts about 3 months, because it's just so destabilizing and so unhealthy. And I finished watching the documentary, and I was telling my husband, I was like, I have boys, but I was like, I feel so badly for these women because they just aren't old enough to know better, and they're really being taken advantage of. Like at 18, I'm sorry.
Trauma. I think
Yes.
It's traumatic, and it affects the limbic system in ways people weren't really wired for.
And so they either, if they stay in it, they start doing drugs and they start drinking so that they can, and there was like one thing where it showed like this woman was being gangbanged by like 20 guys. And I mean, I watched it. I was like, oh my God, I couldn't even finish watching it because it was traumatizing for me to watch, to imagining like she's got to go home to like her family in the morning and act like nothing happened. And I don't know.
Yeah.
Ugh.
And it's tough to discuss this stuff because we don't want to adopt a puritanical Victorian view of sex. And we also want to be very trauma focused and recognize what harms people.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And my heart just genuinely goes out to, any man or woman that's, at that developmental stage and making those choices because they don't even realize what they're doing, and that's, everyone's clueless when they're 18 years old or 17 years old or early 20s. I mean, you're still learning and navigating the world, and we don't always make great choices. But when I see things like that, I just think, wow, that's got to be a tough way to live. Really tough way to live.
And people are sold on this idea of liberation, and then being sold, they're given a bill of goods about, well, this is a way to make easy money and you're being celebrated and worshipped, but there's such a cost to that.
Right. And that's what I think people don't realize. Yeah. Objectifying or
yeah.
The word objectification is something that keeps coming up for me, but I just think women in some ways, depending on how they were raised, the relationships they had with their father or other men, the relationships with their mother can sometimes influence them in very negative ways to make choices like that. How's that for being PC?
It's pretty good, right?
I'm trying to say it without it's not a judgment. It's just, it's just, as a clinician, as a mom, it breaks my heart, to be honest.
Yeah. Yeah. It breaks your heart, particularly what people are taught to value versus. Mm-hmm. I think it's important, no matter what your views on parenting, just that 2 fathers, 2 mothers, whatever, that people have a good parental grounding and that they're more than their bodies.
Yes.
It's good to be body positive. It's great. But sometimes we miss the point. Just we're more than our bodies. We need to develop good habits no matter what.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's interesting to, recognize, like I have a tween and a teen, and when they learned about sex ed in school, and of course we had conversations with them before then when they were elementary schoolers, but when they came home and looked at my husband and I, were like, that's disgusting. I'm like, well, there's going to come a day where you won't find that disgusting, but it's important that you have good role models, and that you're not, the body shaming piece is not an issue. I think that's a larger issue for women, but I definitely believe that, the foundation, if the foundation is weak, it makes individuals that much more susceptible to not making the best choices.
I think that the state has taken on the role a lot of parenting, mm-hmm. and it's great when parents are really involved in what their kids are learning, to kind of check it against their own values and say, okay, this is the objective content. Here's what we think about it from a more values-based perspective.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I don't even know with your clinical practice if this is even the age group of individuals that you work with, but I would imagine that would be, really kind of challenging. I think it'd be challenging.
I usually see people 18 and up just at the facility where I am, and that's kind of my preference too, mm-hmm. because it's when you work with a lot of younger people, you better be comfortable and on a first name basis with people over at Department of Human Services or Child Protective Services, because you're going to be reporting a lot.
Yeah.
A lot of parents exposing their kid in Colorado, parents are exposing their kids to marijuana, smoking a joint with them, doing stuff that they don't get is considered child abuse. That's the thing. Is I'll get people to sign we sign a disclosure form that says this is what you're agreeing to in a therapeutic relationship. And then the stuff that people don't understand is abusive is mind-boggling to me. It's like, yeah, I just kind of smacked my kid across the face for that one.
Yeah.
Talked about this. Now
yeah, you're like, that's not a good choice.
Right. Yeah. So that's kind of a burnout factor for me. But the sweet spot for me is people that are kind of out of adolescence to an early adulthood, because there's really such a ground for reprogramming a lot of the stuff they were taught in home, the shaming beliefs, and they don't necessarily have to go back into that. Yeah. They'll live with parents but can drive and get away. Maybe they live in a dorm. Maybe they're at a perfect opportunity to reappraise this stuff. But yeah.
It really is tough. I mean, it's something that, I'll tell people there have been several times during my lifetime where I did some therapy and it was the best investment in me. That can be a challenge.
It is. And it's so valuable and necessary for the therapist to first validate clients and say, I understand what you're saying. And that way that there's that grounding so that if you are calling people on stuff, they know it's with their best interest in mind. If you're doing it, yeah.
And that's critical. It really is.
I end up having this conversation with a podcast guest, really, that you either, the worst thing is there's this dichotomy there where some therapists will validate a lot, but you don't make any progress. And it feels like kind of finger painting therapy, I'll call it. It's like expression with no motivation. That's great.
Yeah.
Then you get, on the other hand, the kind of quintessential masculine energy therapy of, no matter who you are, no, that's BS. No matter who you are, you need to be responsible for yourself in life. And there's no excuse. It's very existential kind of hammering on people, like freedom at all costs. You're always responsible. And that can make people feel invalidated. Like, you don't understand what I've been through, dude. You got to understand me before we can change. And it's what Carl Rogers said is, but when I accept myself, I'm free to change. So I think people can miss the mark. And I think you can see this in culture of certain voices that are all about validation, but no motivation. And then voices that are like, if you're not getting up and lifting weights for 50 minutes a day, you're a loser. You're a damn loser.
There's a lot. Yeah. There's a lot of that. There is.
On Twitter.
Yeah.
Well, eat tree bark and grow a beard down to your knees subdivision of masculinity.
Oh yeah. It's funny. So everyone's got their little sphere on Twitter. They're people, as I refer to them, the people that, are your biggest cheerleaders and people who probably for the large part agree with a lot of what you have to say. And what fascinates me just from a psychological perspective is assumptions that are made. Assumptions that are made based on the way someone looks or based on what people assume their political affiliations are or their background. And boy, every once in a while I'll look at, someone that's following me and I'll read their little, Twitter blurb and I'm like, wow, I'm not quite sure why you're following me because I think you think I'm something that I'm not. But that's what I find absolutely fascinating on social media. A lot of it's smoke and mirrors, it's illusions, it's, people are projecting onto other people what they think they are.
Yeah, 100%. So the camera adds 15 pounds, Twitter adds, you have to add on more personality. It's like, and we're seeing with online dating media that people will really stage photographs because maybe they look a lot better in person, but the angle, the lighting, the angle stuff, they have to really curate. It's very shocking and worrisome. A book that really talks about the impact of social media on the teen brain is called iGen. So lowercase I, uppercase G, and then EN. It's like iPods, iGen. By Jean Wynn, who's a psychologist, and she talks about how kids are actually spending more time with family, less time with peers, more time at home. They're getting their license later. Well, why is this? Well, because they have access to the very, we could call it processed forms of communication versus holistic, right? You want to talk about processed nutrition, right? You have this stuff that's prepackaged and it's got a lot of additives to it and it's unhealthy and it's by a business. Well, social media is a very processed form of interaction, right? It's prepackaged by a company, and it doesn't have the same nutritional value to the brain as in person.
That's great.
I think I'm going to go somewhere with that. Thank you. This is why I love podcasts. This stuff emerges that wouldn't just through tweets and crap like that.
It just took us a little while to get to this, though. This is what, I love when you're in a podcast with someone and you like you're communicating the entire time, but then you get to a sweet spot and then you're like, that's where we are. Like, this is where like real authentic, organic discussion comes. This is when people like let their guard down a little bit, really kind of, their persona.
You've done a lot of 20-minute podcasts too, and I've seen, and those were helpful for me to review and preparing to talk with you. But I'm glad ours wasn't, because that's not how I operate sometimes. I did have a script. I had like a page-long thing of what you've talked about, so I could just boom, 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 go through it. It's irresponsible not to, I think. You need to.
Oh, I love it. I mean, it's flattering that you took that degree of preparation, because sometimes you get on a podcast, and I'm sure this has happened to you, and it's like you're just flying by the seat of your pants, and you're like, I'm not sure where this is going.
So what do you think about food?
Well, no, sometimes they don't even know, like they just think, oh, because you've done X that I need to have you on. And then they don't really understand like what my background is or who I am as a person. And I always find that's kind of, I'm easy. Like, I'm not going to make the discussion hard, but it's always fascinating. Just again, from that psychology perspective, I'm like, fascinating. So what forged me in that is, first of all, having debate in high school is a big class that I took a lot of. You always want to know what somebody's saying if you're going to argue against it or argue for it. Right.
Or, so that's more of the dogmatic view of it. And then in college, like learning what professors are saying, I don't know. I think the biggest one maybe just be, as a clinician, interviewing clients, getting an intake. Right? Mm-hmm. Getting like a baseline of what they're about, what their problem is, what their resiliency factors are, boom, boom, boom. And then you have that skeletal framework that you go from, and you can expand from it, but it's always with that kind of golden thread, we call it, of the treatment plan. So that's very easy to adapt that for like a podcast guest, where this is what they specialize in. This is their resume. And let's go outside that and apply that to other stuff, but always looking at it from their expertise.
Mm-hmm.
So
it's go ahead.
I have to say, I can't take credit for it. I think it was just my profession and, intentionally wanting to get better at this stuff, because if you're interviewing somebody, people are intelligent and they'll know when you didn't research them or know enough or care enough, and you just want some clout by getting them on.
Yes.
People are very intelligent like that. I would not, especially if they themselves put in the effort into a field, and the podcast host wants to make profit off that, but doesn't know the questions to ask of somebody who actually really cares about this stuff.
Well, and what's interesting to me is, you've touched on a lot of things that I've been known for a long time. Obviously this year, the intermittent fasting thing kind of took off, and I never thought / imagined that would be what I'm really known for. But there are people who now use that as a vehicle to, and this is what's interesting. It's like the profiteering, the mirroring, what are people, do you really want to have someone on because you want to learn about them as a human being, or is it because you want to use it as a vehicle? And so, I don't know if you're into stuff that's woo woo, but like I have a Reiki and energy coach who I adore. And a lot of what we've been working on together is, are people interested in that persona, or is it actually, are they interested in what I have to say? Because a lot of times I go on a podcast now and they just focus on one topic, which is cool, because I'm all about bringing strategies to people, their real world. Or are they interested in hearing about me, or hearing about my perspectives or my life or any of those things? And so it's been an interesting process for sure.
I am into some woo-woo stuff, and it depends on how you define that, right? There's some people who if it's not CBT, then it's not therapy. Okay, so I think I'm probably somewhere in the middle. I've heard great things about Reiki.
It's amazing.
Yes.
It's amazing.
I really need to get to look into that more. I like energy meridians and acupuncture. I do that too. Do you do that? Do you offer it? Are you trained in it, or do you receive it, or both?
I receive it and I refer to it, but I'm not trained in it. So for me, it's very, they use the term complementary. And I always say, I don't think of it as a compliment. I think it's part of self-care. It's part of
Yes.
My anti-anxiety protocol, and I seem very chill, and I am very chill, but I have moments where I'm like, whoa. And so I need to kind of recenter myself. And that can be very effective. What kind of acupuncture do you do?
So my nurse practitioner does obviously prescriptive stuff. She can prescribe medications. She has a lot of supplements that she believes, but she actually does acupuncture herself. So I get the kind, like I've gotten it for sinuses. I've gotten it for just calming effect. So on the collar area region, very, very fascinating. And it's really not painful.
No.
When I was a kid, I was on a lot of antibiotics up until one of the podcasts you did, the interviewer talked about that, being on antibiotics for a long time. So I was on antibiotics. I had allergies as a kid. I had allergy testing, and that involves, for anybody who doesn't know, a bunch of needles back. Boy, was that an experience as a kid. I wouldn't say it was traumatizing because I don't have like flashbacks or memories of it. And I got an action figure afterwards from the Disney store. So needles were not something I have a real fear of anyway. I was kind of desensitized to it. But in acupuncture, though, even so, the needles are so non-invasive. The only place they really hurt is like if you get them at this point in the hand, like the less fat
they can hurt like in here.
The bony areas of fat. Yeah, absolutely. Especially the closer to the nose bone. God. But anyway, it feels better. I can feel my sinuses open up sometimes. I like it. So talking about energy meridian stuff, it's very difficult for me to write that off because it's such an ancient practice that's worked. It's so weird to think about how someone found all those points through trial and error.
It's amazing. The science behind it's amazing. And my acupuncturist is also a master herbalist. So she's actually taught me a lot about CBD. Like she's taken a lot of classes. And so that could be a whole other tangential conversation.
Like the oil?
Or elixirs. Yeah. Yeah.
Oh my gosh, that is a whole other conversation. I love that because CBD oil, especially the isolates, when people take all THC out of it.
Broad spectrum versus isolates. Oh yeah, I got that down.
I'm really a fan of anything. I can't in good conscience tell people who get drug tested to take the CBD that's got any THC in it, even though I think it's a level where you wouldn't come up and test.
It's not supposed to, supposedly.
Yeah, whatever. I think there's a lot to it. I think it's anti-inflammatory and inflammatory, right?
And it also helps with sleep. So for a lot of people, like for me, I don't take it every night, but if I have a night where I'm like, I need to sleep, I have a big day tomorrow, I'll take some. Oh my gosh, it's amazing.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think it gets holistic. So the same way, I mean, when people think THC is the solution for everything because it blunts out your emotions, I think that's a very negative view that gets cloaked in a whole natural path and a naturalistic perspective. And that can be very dangerous because people don't have any kind of understanding that there's very naturally occurring compounds, poison ivy, whatever, plant compounds that we can't consume. So people can view THC as this great savior. Well, it's blunting things out maybe the same way alcohol would. What are you using it for? It's like CBD, though, does not have that same capacity, doesn't have that same psychoactive component. It's an anti-inflammatory, and it helps get the endogenous response to that endogenous relaxation response. It binds to those cannabinoid receptors. So, but in a way that's not THC. Go ahead.
Right. No. And I think the quality is important. I think if people are going to use it, they need to do it responsibly. And so obviously, I like Charlotte's Web. I like Grown, which is GRON. They tend to be like pretty transparent about their processing, pretty clean. But to just use any CBD, you don't know what the heck you're getting. I mean, how do they manufacture? What kind of solvents are used? You want to be asking yourself, what's their quality control so that you ensure you're getting a good product.
Yes. Yeah. I know a guy that I actually met on Twitter who here in Colorado is working with a manufacturing plant that produces really high quality CBD, and he passes on. I mean, they managed to cut costs too. And so but it's very high quality and purity. So that's one good thing about being here in Denver is it's a lot easier for people to research this stuff and get it going. So, well, this has been really awesome. Is there anything you can think of that you would want to add that you haven't, or that you never get to talk about in podcasts? Just anything, no matter how random.
No, I think we have definitely covered the gamut today for sure.
I appreciate it, Cynthia. This has been awesome.
Thank you.
Great.
My pleasure.
All right. Well, thank you for coming on.
You're welcome.